All right, so we're going to go ahead and start recording. Mark's not here yet, but Kyle is here,
Hello.
and maybe Mark will show up here in a moment. Maybe he won't. And in the meantime, we're going to move forward with searching for land. I want to squeeze in a couple of quick things. Um, so I have not prepped you for this question. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want
Okay.
to. And so that is when I talk about residual income streams, whether it's in my book or in my podcasts or wherever. Does it do when you hear that talk? Does it sound like something scammy or pyramid scheme or get rich quick?
Um, no. It sounds to me the opposite of get rich quick. You put in a bunch of work up front and slowly get money over time.
Yeah, I kind of I mean, to me, it's really simple and obvious, and it's even kind of stupid simple. And
Yeah.
I travel a path, and then it's like either money just starts to show up mysteriously, or I travel a path, and then later I get this idea of like, oh, I could stick this thing on it and earn like $1 a month, and it's like, okay, and and stuff like that. Now, granted, my efforts have gotten more significant, but that's because I I did so well before. But I don't know. I find that outside of Permies, if I try to talk about it, it seems to fall into this category of snake oil stuff, and I feel like it's the only people who want to talk about it are basically sleazebags
Mm.
and how to be sleazy, and it's like, okay, but how do I do that? How do I like get $1 million overnight with that? And it's like that's not what it is at all.
Right.
And then if I try to share my stuff about it, um, and how it's I because I feel like it's extremely wholesome, and but when I try to share it, it's like I'm the scammer, and it's like what?
That's
What?
weird because you're not asking for any money from them or anything like that.
Yeah.
I, I might be kind of different than your average Joe just because I'm a musician and most of my friends are artists in some way. So I know about residual income streams. They kind of started happening a couple of years ago with me just having this hobby that I like and putting out music, and then suddenly I'm getting I don't know, $20 every couple months. I mean, I'm no one cares about my music. It's like I'm very very small potatoes, but it's something that I would have done for free. But suddenly it's out there, and I get yeah a check for $20 every couple months. And the more I do, the more I get.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example of residual income stream. You put it out there, and then some people buy it. I mean, the other thing is the whole concept of putting it out there for free. And I kind of feel like, yeah, I've put out tons of stuff for free, and then there's a couple of things where I put a price tag on it, and it's like, then people are like, it should be for free. Well, that's getting into a whole nother area,
Yeah,
but yes, music is an excellent example of a residual income stream. You do this thing, which you think is cool, and then you take this extra time to record it,
yeah,
and
and that
then
costs a little money up front too. It costs well if you're gonna make money on if you want to make money on the back end, you have to actually spend a little money on the recording because no one's going to pay for or really like spend a lot of time on the streaming services with low quality recordings,
Yeah.
which are super abundant. Everybody with a with an Apple and a $100 interface can record music these days, and that's good for getting a demo out, stuff like that. But yeah, so I've spent a little money on that, and I probably haven't. Oh, yeah, I probably have. I think I've made back what I've spent on it at least.
So, all right. Good. I'm glad to hear it. But maybe I'm talking to the wrong guy too.
Yeah,
I just kind of feel like when I try to talk about things like here we are, we're talking about finding property or, finding your homestead dream, connecting with your homestead dream. And I just kind of feel like it ends up with a lot of this negative Nellyism where a lot of people are kind of like, it'll never work.
well, I
It's
mean,
not possible. People today can't afford that. It's millions of dollars. And then they want to start talking about, I don't know, political constructs and all that stuff. And it's kind of like, I, I don't know. I feel like I've worked so hard to make it so much easier for people to achieve, and it's all kind of ignored. And I think one of those components is residual income streams, because it's like for a lot of people they have to get a mortgage. There's no way they could do it now. Of course, I want to find a path for them to do it without a mortgage. But then it's like they need some monthly dollars coming in order for them to get by.
yeah.
And I just kind of feel like, man, I don't know how much spoon feeding I can do, and I don't. All right, so
I think they're just trying to justify not putting in the effort. I think I think they've already decided to that there is a chance, any of these residual streams that you'll get nothing, and there's a really good chance you'll get nothing. And it's a lot of effort before you. There's a lot of upfront effort to find the thing that will actually pay off. It's the try 100 things and two will pay off, and you don't know which two ahead of time. But that's a lot of effort that people just don't want to do. And instead of just saying, I don't want to do that, they come up with this justification and go into politics and all this stuff. There's, I'm not the, I have friends who are musicians who are just amazing musicians, but all they do is that's all they do. Like, as they don't go put the effort in to record themselves or push on record companies to put it out or put the money up front to put it out themselves or any of that. It's just I don't know.
maybe that's the piece that I'm missing, is that when somebody's being a negative Nelly, it'll never work and whatever. And it's like, no, 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 you don't understand. This is for industrious people, not for dumb
Yeah.
fucks. You're a dumb fuck, so you have to wallow in shit. That's how the system works. And it's like, well, the system should give me candy even if I am a dumb fuck. And it's kind of like, you just keep wishing for that. Let's see how that works out for you.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like maybe that's the key, is to just say, for industrious, lovely, generous people. I mean, I kind of feel like for me, I was giving tons of stuff away for free. And then I don't know, I connected tiny little monetizations to those things while they remained free. And then it's bizarre how, I don't know, I'll bet I have a few hundred things out there and they add up now to like thousands of dollars a month. But it didn't like happen overnight, but it was easy. It was it was easy because I was already giving it away for free anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for your feedback. That actually provided me an important piece, in that it's like for industrious people, it's as easy as breathing. And granted, there's your musician friends who share and contribute and do stuff with others, and they ask for zero in return. And it's plausible that someday, I mean, one of the things that could happen is that you could record something with one of these people that you know, and then you could say, tell you what, you I'm going to give you a copy of this, and you have an unlimited distribution license. You can go out and make money with it however you want. And I'm cool with that. And so they might take it and go out and make money or not.
Oh, they never do. It's yeah, I've done that before. I've recorded with great people, and then I paid for the recording and the pressing of the record, and they were just totally fine. I gave them like 5, 10 records each. Here you go, and you can give them away to your family or whatever. Keep it forever. And I go and I sell them at shows and online, and yeah,
Yeah.
and they're totally happy with that. They were gonna play music anyway, free. So
Okay.
they don't want to put in that the second part. And yeah.
Okay. Now, all right. So I'm going to set aside residual income streams. Thank you, sir. I feel much better. I was kind of starting to feel dirty, like, and I can't imagine why I would feel dirty. I feel like what a freeing thing to do what you love doing, and then through the magic of stuff, monies show up. What an amazing thing. Another thing that's frustrated me with residual income streams, I don't want to turn this into a podcast about residual income streams, is it seems like the only thing that a lot of people will even count is like stock stuff, which I don't do, um, or uh, rentals. Like they buy a house and they rent it out, and I'm kind of thinking like that was just. I mean, stock stuff seems like an investment. Like stock stuff seems like stock stuff. It doesn't seem like a residual income stream. It seems like a totally
Um,
different beast to me.
well, if
Hello.
you, hey, Mark's here.
Hey,
Sorry.
Mark, we're recording, so But
Yeah, the stock stuff. It's you put it in there, and then through the power of exponential growth, you get a whole lot more than you put in, and there are formulas out there saying that if on over the 30-year average of your retirement, you can take out, if you have X amount, you can take out Y amount according to this formula, like a Y amount per month, basically for the rest of your life. So if you start early and let it grow,
and
um,
if it all pans out
if
the
it all
way it's
pans out, but
panned out the way before, I mean, it is a form of professional gambling.
it takes a lot of discipline, but um, over the long term, I've been through 2008 and then the 2000 as an investor, and just I both of those events I ended up richer on the other side because I just didn't sell
Right.
as it was falling. So yeah, you gotta have a plan. Um, do your research. I don't do specific stocks. I do the whole market and a mix of, you know, the whole United States market and the world market and bonds and stuff. So um,
Oh,
it's pretty passive the way I do it. Um, and then I also have a rental property um, that's also pretty passive because um, it's my friends that live there,
okay.
and they like me and I like them, and it's not adversarial. And if something fixes, they break, or no, if something breaks, they fix it, and they just charge me for the materials. And in exchange, I keep their rent pretty well below market rate. They're happy and I'm happy. I make a little bit of money, and they get a pretty cheap place to live.
Would you count those two things as residual income streams?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'll back off from that one. I should mention that years ago, when Bitcoin was worth $600, like in the span of 2 months, two different people gave me money for stuff in Bitcoin, and I was just like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm glad to learn about Bitcoin. And so I got $500 for the Bitcoin when it was worth 600. Now it's worth something like 55,000 or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's
that's the
gone
way
up
to do it.
gone up by a factor of 100. I had no idea. I was just, but the funny thing is that one of those two guys who got, in fact, the guy that got me started, that's his thing, was like watching Bitcoin and watching real estate so closely that he would flip back and forth. And then he had this thing where he said, Bitcoin's not going to do good for the next 2 years, but real estate is. So I'm moving money into real estate now. And then the real estate would do really well. And then he's like, now it's going to reverse. The real estate's not going to do good, but Bitcoin is. And so then you put a bunch of money into Bitcoin, and sure enough, it would take off. So he, all this time, he kept telling me, like every a few months, he would say, here's what's going to happen. And sure enough, that's what happened. So I got a note from him a few days ago, and he said, it's like Bitcoin is currently at something like 55,000. He says it's going to go to 250 before the end of the year. So there you go.
So
Maybe it will, maybe it
uh,
won't.
that doesn't sound passive the way he's doing it.
Yeah, that's
True,
definitely not.
true,
I did
true.
my research, you know, pretty hard as far as investing. I found a uh, a system, a program that I could stick to that works for me. You know, I did and started, and I've stuck with that, and it has worked for me. And it's very passive. Um,
There
so
is an investment strategy. Sorry, I'm got in here
go ahead.
late. Versus the standard index investment, where you just invest in the entire stock market, right? And over time, you'll get a certain type of percentage of return, but you do have periods where you could go 2 or 3 or 4 years where your investment has dropped, right? Over time, yes, it will come back and be higher than it was before, and you'll get that percentage return. Um, but you can invest in a different type of portfolio. There's one in particular called the golden butterfly. And what that is you are still investing in broad markets or funds, but the assets are distributed a little differently. So instead of the entire stock market, there's one that's called the golden butterfly, and it's a 20% of your money is in the total stock market, 20% is in a small cap value, 20% is in long-term bonds, 20% is in short-term bonds, and 20% is in gold. And that balance means that when certain funds are performing poorly, others tend to perform well. That as stocks go down, people will put their money into bonds or into gold. And then when stocks go up, they'll switch that money back and forth. And so the performance sort of balances each other out. And so while that type of and there's a website called portfoliocharts.com that has a whole bunch of info
Hey, I'm
about
on
these
it.
different things.
It's on the screen.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at that on my web browser. So yeah, so what you'll see is that once per year, essentially, I guess, or however often you want to mess with it, you can go in and rebalance those. So certain things will go up, certain things will go down. So you will redistribute that money, say once a year, so that you have those percentages are the same. And there's a chart somewhere on that site where it shows right there, that grid. So as you see at the top, it'll show red blocks are years where that portfolio lost to, was it the 2 or 3% or more, and then the dark, I call it aquamarine there, is when it went up at least 9%. And so what that shows is for how many years you hold your money in that portfolio starting at a certain year, what is your total return? And you'll notice that the worst case scenario, it takes 3 years before you have broken, where you haven't lost money on it. And so this is a far more stable type of investment, where when I've had like a total market investment and I had money in, I guess really the first 401k that I had was back in like 97, 98. And I left that company and went to another one. And in 2001, well, yeah, the market had dropped significantly, right? Around 2000, I guess. And so the money that was in that fund, it took until like, I don't know, 2004 or five before it finally got above where it was at in 1999. And then of course it went back down in 2007. Now it's worth significantly more than it used to be. I started at like almost 3,000. It's like 15,000 now. I've just left it in there. But there's those definite dips. So if you're relying on that year to year for income, there's going to be years when that total fund is lower. So, but this one is sort of a lot more stable and can be a lot more passive and still be considered income.
Gentlemen, I'm going to ask that we tap the brakes on this. I mean, I thought that before we would jump into our primary podcast topic, I would just do a quick shout out about residual income streams and how I kind of feel like the thing I want to share, or the thing that I feel is important, is it's coming off weird, and I'm feeling weird about it, and I wanted to express my weirditude. And I still believe that I want to have a word perhaps for the kinds of residual income streams I want to talk about, that is not investments, and is also not rental property, but instead things more like web pages with affiliate income, or music that you put out, and then there's this income that comes in. I mean, I feel like, because, like, for example, Kyle, you were saying that you felt that your investments and your rental income were indeed passive income streams or residual income streams.
Yes.
I feel like I need a new word for what I want to talk about, because it does seem like every time I try to talk about it, it gets flooded with these other flavors, I guess, which to me are not the same thing.
What about royalties?
I think royalties would be a residual income stream.
But that's, I mean, I think that's the category of residual income streams that you're more into.
Yeah, royalties, I think, totally fit. You did a thing, and you may have gotten paid, or you may have not gotten paid, but you get royalties down the road. And then that would be an income stream if the royalties actually get paid out. I mean, as a self-pub author, I love the idea of having a publisher who's going to promote the fuck out of my book and sell it, and then give me a royalty. The thing is that I'm just way too. I don't like, if I got nothing back on my book ever, and the publisher said, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go get rich, but we will pay you nothing. I would be more comfortable with that than when the publisher says, we're going to pay you a royalty based on the number of sales, and we're going to give you this much money per book sold. And then they either A, lie about the number of copies sold to me so they pay me less money, or uh, B, I'm not sure if this is even worse. Somehow I just am certain that they're lying, even if they are telling the truth. And so that's my own personal wackiness, my own personal sickness. And I just got to not get involved in that. But yes, I think a royalty does count for this thing I want to talk about, for the space that I would want to be. But it's like, I, I guess based on this conversation, I'm thinking I need a new word. I need a new word so I can talk about this thing. And now is not the time to try and think of a new word.
Okay, we're talking about property.
Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to squeeze in. I thought I'd squeeze
Okay.
these two things in like in about a minute a pop. And the other thing is that here we are. We're just days away from starting this Kickstarter about the skip book. And I'm I feel like the video that we've got, the little Kickstarter video, is really good. Like,
Yeah.
because I kind of feel like this is a very different thing, and the opportunity for cognitive dissonance is astounding, because it's too different, too weird. And once again, though, I am concerned that it sounds like a pyramid scheme, a snake oil thing, or something like that. And it's like, so as we're going into this Kickstarter, I'm not hearing a lot of that, but I've heard it a couple of times, a couple of quick mentions, and it's kind of like, I don't. In the end, I've decided to just go whole hog, and it's like, if it's going to sound that way, it's going to sound that way. There's nothing else I can do. I think it is definitely not that way, but I kind of wanted to check in. So before we started recording, Kyle, you told me that you have 10 BBs right now,
Yeah.
but you're not looking to inherit property. So why are you messing with this?
It's Have you seen that cartoon where they're talking, like it's the scientists talking about global warming, and someone says like, "Hey, what if we solve all these problems and global warming, and we made the world a better place
For nothing.
and for nothing? You know, like a global warming's a hoax, and we did all this, we made the world a better place for nothing." It's I'm just
We're in a better place.
Yeah, I'm doing it because it makes me a more self-reliant, resilient, and in my opinion, a better person. And yeah, I could do all these things on my own, but it's this is really great direction. You know, I don't know. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, I do. I
It's like I
it's
was a Boy Scout, and these are merit badges. You know,
like for adults.
for adults.
I think I would look at it as their skills worth learning and knowing how to do, regardless of whether you're going to try to inherit property from somebody who, you know. But yeah, I've just started to look at them, and it's like, oh man, I can get hooked on wanting to do these. That accomplishment, the feeling of accomplishment for doing them.
Yeah,
So
you get
yeah,
a little warm fuzzy when your BB gets approved. It's I did something right for once. Like here's someone here's someone telling me I didn't screw up, or telling me I screwed up, and then I go try again, and then it's even better when I do it right.
there's
I think
definitely a sense of accomplishment there. Yeah.
I do think that for every person that might be, pursuing skip for the sake of inheriting property, I think that there's 20 people that are doing it for either other reasons or just simply just for their own personal yucks. Like I'm glad to have done the thing, and now I've kind of, I'm kind of in this, I'm in the club now, or something. I'm I have I have been validated that I am awesome, but based on my own standards, and I don't know, it's fun.
And
Uh, Mark,
also, when you're on Permies and you're talking about a subject and you go down to the bottom of someone's comment and it says that they've got this many BBs or this badge or whatever, it's like, okay, these people at least have a little verified expertise and I can take them for their word. I can give them, a little bit bigger of the benefit of a doubt for their comment.
Mark, have you done any BBs?
Yes, I have a little solar system that I had set up, and so officially the only one that I've done is the monthly maintenance on the batteries,
Okay.
testing them on all that. So since I'd already built my solar system, I had submitted that, but the requirements were show all the parts before it's been assembled, and that it should be a DC only system. Mine has an inverter, and right now I'm using it all of it off the inverter. So that one didn't meet the requirements, but I am tempted to take it apart and get the DC panel and hook it up that way. So I might do that, because then those two combined, I believe, would be enough to get the initial badge for electrical.
Cool. I so I think a big part of where my struggle is, because I need to, I feel a powerful urge to at least get the concept conveyed into the brains of others, and I kind of feel like there's a lot of opportunity for the concept to not get conveyed, and I feel like the Kickstarter video does a great job of conveying it. And just this morning we got a new some updates to the animation. It's about three quarters done now, and so the rest of the animation is still like these little black and white stills, but the colorization and the animation is really kind of bringing it to life. It's been kind of fun. So we're almost there. The Kickstarter is almost ready to launch. um, I feel like the when we ask for feedback on the video, the feedback is getting to be a lot of like people saying you should make it so that it's for these people too, or whatever. Basically, the important thing is that people understand what it is. Like their questions reflect that they understand what it is, and that to me is what's really huge. It's kind of like now the suggestions that they're making are like are basically spelling it out very clearly. I understand what this is and I want more. And so it's like, oh, good, mission accomplished. And now if the video has other annoying attributes, that's totally okay. All right, let's move on to our primary topic, which is searching for land. And Kyle, I think you're in the driver's seat because it was your idea to do this podcast, and I can't remember where we left off last time. Where are we? What are we talking about next?
Okay, I think the last thing we talked about was having neighbors that don't spray. And then kind of on that same subject, we're talking about, I think we talked about privacy. I think we talked about the importance of a
Yes,
nice
we did.
tall berm, being at the end of a road, avoiding HOAs, and being scrupulous of your CC&Rs. I don't think so. I think that's where we left off. I think the next thing on my list is slope. We could probably combine that with solar aspect.
Well, it's kind of funny. We're like reviewing the book Desert or Paradise, and basically in the book he makes a case of like the only way that you can do all this stuff with water that he advocates is if you've got slope. If you don't have slope, you're kind of stuck with whatever you're stuck with. But if you want to basically make water retention systems, you have to have slope. So that's one thing. For me, I keep thinking that it's like, okay, I want to live someplace where I can build soil, and I can't. I need to do that in a cold climate. I'm going to build soil in a cold climate, but at the same time, part of what I want to do is to be able to extend my growing season. And a major component for extending my growing season is going to be able to get the cold air mass to go away. So to basically kind of create something that is not a frost pocket. And I need slope for that, because if I'm someplace flat, I can't get the cold air to go away. It kind of comes here and hangs out, and I'm stuck with it.
Right. Could
So,
you talk about why you need a cold climate to build soil? I don't think you've gone into that before.
um, well, in a tropical climate, you'll have a jungle, but the
Right.
dirt itself is pretty much just dirt. It's like almost like cement, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the microbial activity that's inside the soil is so active that if an animal comes along and poops on the trail,
Right.
that poop is gone in a couple of hours. And so the result is that the soil has very low organic matter. This is why terra preta, or biochar, works so incredibly well in a tropical or subtropical climate, and then it'll last 500 years. Whereas if you do hugelkultur, I would imagine if you did a 7 foot tall hugelkultur bed in a tropical area, it would probably be 100% dirt in a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Okay. Wow.
Whereas in your area, the Seattle area,
Mm-hmm.
that same hugelkultur bed probably would last 10 or 12 years. And in my area, it's going to last 30 years. So it's just going to be slower. So the bacteria, the organisms in the soil that make soil, um, they're going to go dormant in the wintertime here.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so they're much slower acting and things of that nature. Um, Further, I think in your area, which is going to be a little bit moister, as well as warmer than here, but still rather cool. So you're looking at like low
Right.
temperatures in the wintertime of about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Whereas here, I'm kind of thinking it's more like 10 below. Although I would say most winters, a third of the winters, we don't get below zero at all. And then a third, we do get below zero, but like don't even get to -10. And then the other third, we get past -10. So, but anyway, you're moister and warmer than here. Um, and where you are, there's a lot of lichen, there's a lot of moss, there's a lot of fungus and insects,
Mm-hmm.
at least a lot compared to here.
Right.
So have I answered your question?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Next.
Next. Okay. Oh, and solar aspect. So that slope. Oh, actually, let's talk about, is there about maximum and minimum slope? Like, or not, there's obviously some slope is better than zero slope, but is there, how much is too much with slope?
Well, I mean, I'm going to start with saying if it's perfectly vertical, is
That's
it's like
bad.
if it's like a big rock, like if you've got a 1,500-foot cliff face, then you're not going to plant in it. But On the other hand, I know of places where they've got like 1,000 foot tall cliff face, and it's facing south, and their microclimate there is like 2 zones warmer than other
Right.
places in Montana, because it's like it is a single giant rock, and because it's a single giant rock as opposed to say gravel, then um, as the sun hits it, it absorbs it remarkably well, and it absorbs it deeply, and then it sheds that heat back out again deeply. So it lasts a long, long time. So naturally, our first thought is like, well, you can't work that, and it's kind of like, oh, but I've got other plans for that. Um,
Yeah, Sepp would say otherwise, doesn't he? He plants strawberries in the rock faces and stuff like that.
sure, yeah, there are things you can plant there. Of course, how well do those strawberries do if you're with a lack of moisture?
Right.
Yeah, because if you on a face like that, there's probably not much soil up there.
Mhm.
But let's go a little bit. I mean, let's talk about slope in terms of degrees, where 90 degrees is vertical and 0 is horizontal. And I know that there's some other scales where degrees means something different, but for this case of
Yeah.
this conversation, let's go with that. So if we have a 45-degree slope, then we're talking about something that is precisely halfway between horizontal and vertical. And so I think that's a pretty steep slope, a 45
Yeah.
degree slope, and it has some serious challenges with it. And I would say that, but Sepp would be able to work with it. A 45-degree slope for a lot of soil types is steeper than the angle of repose,
Right.
which
Mhm.
means that the angle of repose, let's just do a quick recap, is like if I were to take sand and make a pile of sand, and I would just pour the sand at the top and kind of make a cone of sand on the ground, then the angle of repose for that sand is the angle at which the sand naturally ends up with. Further, even more than that, let's leave that pile of sand for a couple of years. What's the angle of repose now? And so what is the angle that it ends up at in time? So if I've got a sandy soil, but and by the way, for a lot of sand, the angle of repose is going to be something fairly gentle. It's going to be kind of a 3-to-1, like which is going to be a little bit close to like a 30-degree angle. If we're going to say 0 is horizontal and 90 is vertical, I would say most sand piles are going to be at about 30 degrees. Fair?
Seems right.
Hmm.
So if you've got land that has a slope of 45 degrees, that's very steep. That's steeper than the angle of repose for sand. Therefore, if you're thinking like, I'm going to make terraces, then the idea of the terrace is you're going to make a flat spot, and then you're going to have a spot between terraces that's even steeper than the original slope. And it's kind of like if you're starting with something that's steeper than the angle of repose for whatever your soil is, because certain soils are going to be okay with a steeper angle of repose. Either you've got to add some structural engineering to that to kind of, guide it into basically being some type of retaining wall, or, to be able to hold a slope that is steeper than the angle of repose of the materials. or else your effort to make a terrace will be folly. You'll be just scraping your what soil you have and basically sending it down the hillside. Okay, that's a for a 45-degree angle slope. That's some pretty steep stuff. Now, uh, we could talk about something that's like 10 degrees or 15 degrees. That's fairly comfortable. I mean, I would say that if you're going to try and make a road that will go straight up, I'm not sure if you can, like if you're and you have snow and you have winter time, I'm not sure you can have much success with anything steeper than about 10 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm thinking of like I'm going to try and drive up an icy road that's 10 degrees and I've got all-wheel drive and snow tires at 10 degrees, still dodgy. I'm not sure I can make it.
I
That's
have
about
personal experience with that actually. One of the first houses that I owned was on a street that you did have to go up about a 10-degree slope. And there was a couple times when we got 6 or 8 inches of snow and you couldn't drive up that road. And the salt trucks couldn't get up that road to salt it either. So I do recall going out with my snow shovel and shoveling a single track for the tires to sit on of about 500 feet of road so I could
Wow.
actually drive my car up to the top and get to the level road that my house was on and get up there. So yeah, that wasn't much fun.
now. I guess the thing I'm thinking is like I'm trying to describe for the listener about how steep is 10 degrees, and I'm using this as kind of a metric. So I'm willing to submit that 10 degrees is about that. That's about how steep of a slope 10 degrees is. And now,
See if I can find a visual.
right, there might be a visual for what is 10 degrees. I guess what I'm fishing for is to say, like, I'm guessing at what I think is about 10 degrees. You're saying that that road was about 10 degrees.
Well, it might have actually been steeper. I mean, looking at that right there, I would actually say that that road was more like 20 degrees slope, just from what I physically recall.
Okay.
Of
All
course,
right.
it's been a while now, so. But there was more than one time that I had to park, and it was not that great of a neighborhood at the bottom of that hill. And so I had to park my car down there, sort of in the middle of nothing, and hope it wouldn't get broken into. So, yeah.
Jeez. All
Because if
right.
you got freezing rain was the worst one, right? You'd have drizzling rain during the day and at night it would freeze. And then you couldn't get down the hill without crashing at the end of that street. And you couldn't get up it if it was freezing early enough in the day.
So, um, I guess so. That's a 10-degree slope is a fairly gentle slope, and of course, there's ways to mitigate it so that I mean, if you did some switchbacks or something like that, you can make it so it's easier to traverse for a vehicle. Um, uh, I know that when I lived on Mount Spokane, when I bought the property, I was warned that four-wheel drive will not be able to get out of the property in the winter because it was a valley property, and the way to get out was to go up the hillside, and it was just a straight shot, and it was probably more than 10 degrees slope. All-wheel drive you could have year-round access, but four-wheel drive would not make it, is what I was told. Now, of course, you add in chains or something like that, and it improves your odds significantly. So the question that Kyle's putting forth is slope. Like, how much is too much? Well, diversity is good. I think having some diversity is awesome. Having some bits that are gentler and some bits that are steeper is great. That's even better. Um, and of course, I kind of feel like when you start getting into like 30 degrees or so, that's getting to some pretty steep country. Like if you try to walk up that if you just go a few hundred feet, you're going to be pretty tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, all right. So is this, I'm not sure if I'm even answering your question correctly. I would, if it was steeper than 30 degrees, I think I would let it go.
Yeah.
Unless it's like, oh yeah, there's some of the property has got this steeper stuff, and there's some of this property that's got the gentler stuff. Then I think I'd be okay with it.
I think I recall Bill Mollison saying somewhere that anywhere greater than 20 degrees should be left in permanent forest woodland. Um, yeah. So solar aspect would probably be next on the list, just because that's
Let's do a quick exploration. What do you suppose is the average slope overall of the Kramerhof? Because I like where you're going with. Bill Mollison says, what was it? Anything over 20?
I think so.
Anything over 20 degrees should be just left as permanent forest. So when we look at pictures from far away of Sepp Holzer's Kramerhof, then what kind of slope does it look like that whole property is on?
Yeah, the pictures that I've seen, it looks like that the edges, that's where you get into the really steep slope, the steep drops. But it's hard to tell from, maybe this will be a little easier, what the majority of it is. Because Kyle, you also had in your notes, after slope, you had deep soil before solar aspect.
Mhm.
And so I was thinking it's like when you get into that 30 or 45 degree slope, then you'd also have to wonder just how much soil is left on that slope, that hasn't been washed away. Now, from that view, that's looking like 15 to 20 degrees on average.
Yeah.
Okay. From this picture, it looks like the lower part is 25 to 30 and the higher part is pushing 45. From this angle, which is, we want to look at it from the angle. We want to look at it from the side, right?
Yeah.
As you look
Right.
at it straight on, it looks like, oh, it looks flat.
From straight above.
So the lower part is better than I thought. I mean, still, you got to have those switchbacks or you're not getting up there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the thing is that, and another thing I want to work in is the whole concept of a permaculture approach that's a symbiotic relationship with a woodland. So I think of Ben Law, but I think Ben Law's land is probably pretty flat. It's got a little bit of slope to it, but it's a pretty gentle slope. But this is some fairly steep country that Sepp has here, and I kind of feel like it does have its challenges when you have this much slope, but I like the idea that we're going to have something gentler. Like this is a kind of slope. So the Kramerhof is the kind of slope that's challenging, and it's like, so you can do it, but it's going to be harder. It's going to be more work. I would have to say that when looking for land and you're going, I mean, I think that if you could find something that's more in the 10-degree slope. No, okay, let me run this by you guys. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking 25 to 30 for the lower half and pushing 45 for the upper half. Does that sound about right?
What I'm seeing is, say, to the left of that marker, where it looks like there's some woods like in the middle there, that seems like a very steep part where I would agree that section in the middle has like a 45 degree. And then when you get up towards the top, like if you're looking at the switchbacks, um, 1, 2, 3, 4. So starting at the bottom there, and you count the going back and forth on the fourth one, it seems that right around there it starts to level out a little bit, but not. It's still steep, but not quite so steep. So maybe the top quarter of the property is more like in that 10 to 15 degree, but that middle section for sure looks like it's at, at that 40 degree or 45 degree slope.
So I would say that that land probably also has a lower price tag when it starts getting that steep.
Right.
Yeah.
And
no
so,
agricultural use for standard monoculture.
Right. All right, Kyle, this is your question. Are we coming anywhere close to answering your question?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's like a simple 20%. There you go. That's it.
Now,
It's a complex issue.
I kind of feel like Mollison, if Mollison's going to be taking on something, and Mollison has been exposed to a whole bunch of slopes that are like 5 degrees to 25 degrees, and he gets all this stuff to work with, I could see how he would say like everything over 20 degrees, just leave it permanent forest. Not because it can't be done, but because it's like, yeah, it's just more work. It's harder, just screw it, let it go. And on the other hand, if you're going to be Sepp and it's like everything you're looking at is 25 degrees to 50 degrees, then Sepp might say, oh yeah, anything over 45, forest. Not even going to mess with it. So it's kind of like it's relative and subjective. What do you got? It's like, okay, we can get this stuff with the real gentle slopes and all the southern exposure, $15,000 an acre. Or you can get this stuff that has more of like a west-facing slope, and it's much steeper, $2,000 an acre. I don't know. You might be looking at that second one going like, I think I like this one better.
So that's a good segue into solar aspect. Like, how much of a deal breaker is being off from being directly south? If is it obvious, like I've heard you say many times on the podcast before that, if you have north facing slope, just sell it and go somewhere else. But what about east or west or southeast, southwest, northeast, northwest, that kind of stuff?
If it's going to be steep north facing slope and it's 100% that, yeah, I wouldn't want to even try. I mean, there's a lot you can do there. There's a lot of cool things you can do there from a permaculture perspective, to be sure. I just don't feel like because it's going to be too difficult to do a bunch of the things that I want to do. Damn it. So, at the lab here, we have some patches of steep north-facing slope, and I'm kind of thinking like perfect spot for the freezer wafati. Yeah. Oh man, it's like that's what I keep thinking about. It's the freezer wafati, and then for a bunch of different things, I keep coming back and thinking like, oh, this is going to be a great spot to do a Johnson style air well, that north facing slope, that steep north facing slope. I don't know, tons and tons of cool things keep coming up that are going to be great to do in that steep north facing slope. So it's like, it's not that it's pointless or useless. It's just that it's like if that's all I have, I'm limited at all the things I could do. There's not going to be enough sun there to do all the things I want to do. And not only that, but it's going to be on average probably 10 degrees colder than something that's flat,
Yeah.
or and then 15 or 20 degrees colder than something that's south facing. But that's another thing too, is you get the south facing slope, and a lot of times you end up with everything on the south facing slope is totally cooked. It's like there's a powerful lack of life there because it's kind of desert. And so you've got to get in there and really charm it in order to be able to grow things there, because it's got an excess of sun.
Yeah, it's like ground temperature difference is significant. So your north facing slope, you're just going to have a really short growing season because it's going to take longer for that soil to warm up in the spring, and it'll start to cool down faster in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
On the
Yeah.
south facing slope, I guess if you had multiple layers of plants to protect the soil from the direct sunlight, that could help too.
Oh, true. Oh, true. There's things you can do
Yeah.
to mitigate that. Yeah. I mean, but that's the other thing too, is like with the south facing slope, there's stuff that you can do to get everything to work out. But with the north facing slope, not much you can do there. I mean, I almost bought a property that had very little soil that was in year-round direct sun, and there would have been a fair bit of north-facing slope, and I was starting to think about heliostats. Like, all I got to do is get a whole bunch of heliostats, and it's like I'm glad that property did not work out. So I like where I'm at right now much better. I feel so much better about it. But the lab has north facing slope in general, but it's so the most of the lab is so on the it's a valley floor of sorts. It's alluvial soil, so it's kind of got a roly poly thing, and because of the roly poly, it has a lot of south facing slopes, like a bunch of little south facing slopes. But overall, in general, on average, in fact, um, I saw the land was available for sale, and because I could see that it was on average north facing slope, I rejected it out of hand. And then I had a real estate agent who's like, I gotta show you this property. You're gonna totally love it. Had all these great things to say about it. And so we got out there, and I'm looking at it, and he's telling me the price, and it's like, sweet price. And yeah, it's generally north facing, but it's got so much roly poly. It's like it's got 30 little properties on it that have got south facing slope. And so I'm kind of thinking like, no, this has got a lot of awesomeness to it. So the question is how important is south facing slope? And I'd say, no, that is the best. That is important. And then at the same time, if you can get an equivalent property for half the cost, but it's not south facing slope, but it's still got, a lot of sun, it may very well be worth it. I mean, that's another thing too. It's like, to go get the ultimate property might be $15 million.
Right.
Whereas something that's got, that's closer to like the lab might be $500,000. And so then it's kind of like, question one, how much money you got? I think it's a better chance that you got $500,000 than you got 15 million. So definitely worth considering. All right. Any other comments or questions about solar aspect?
Well, I think we covered it.
Okay. Next.
Um, okay, and we talked about, or we haven't talked about, but you mentioned weeds. And you want to see weeds on a property when you go look at it.
Yeah. It's one of the most important things to me. I mean, that's a total showstopper. If I do not see weeds, if all I see is grasses, I'm out. I don't want to even
Yeah,
touch it. No way. It's I don't care if it's being sold for $10 an acre. Don't want it. I can't work with that. I'm out. Because that shows that there's persistent herbicides there. And it's like you can't grow a garden. You can't grow apple trees. You can't grow anything there. It's like I mean, it'll be half as shitty in 10 years. And then another 10 years after that, it'll be half as shitty again. But when do you want to grow a garden? Are you willing to wait 30 years to grow a garden?
right.
Or, are you going to say like, oh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in 100 dump truck loads of topsoil and dump it on here and grow in that. Yeah, that's my plan. And then, of course, if your roots take off and do great, they'll eventually get below that topsoil and then hit the stuff that's going to make them die. So, yeah, need
Yeah.
weeds. I need to
Need
see a
weeds.
lot of weeds.
Okay. And you mentioned deep soil in your article. You want deep soil already on the place?
Well,
Certainly
yes.
helps.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I looked at a couple of properties where they had, soil that was like maybe 4 feet deep in the valleys. And like I looked at this one property that was 400 acres, and it's kind of like, wow, if I build a wafati, I have to build it right here in this little tiny patch because that's the only place where I might be able to dig down. But everything
Mhm.
else is like solid rock, and it's like I just can't, you know. So and a lot of Montana, I mean, we're in the Rocky Mountains, and so you see these steep mountains, and the reason why they're steep is because they're giant rocks. Um, and then the only stuff that has soil is on the flat stuff in the valleys. And so it's kind of like, but I want to build in the soil. I don't want to build on rocks. And
Having that roly-poly slope can be helpful there because then you haven't had decades or hundreds of years of soil erosion just from the water running off of a regular flat slope.
right. So, I mean, the big thing is if I'm going to build a wafati, it depends on me being able to dig. I need to dig. And on top of that, like both of you have been here, and
Mhm.
so I've got two properties. I have base camp, which was the property that's the nearest to the lab that was for sale after I bought the lab. And base camp is like a giant 20-acre rock. It's like a single rock. And then there's the lab, which has incredibly deep soil. Now, when you're just looking around, when you're standing at base camp and you look around base camp, there's trees here. And then when you're standing at the lab, there's trees there too. But what's the difference in the tree count?
Yeah,
Do you
it's
guys
really thick on the lab.
on the lab? It's a jungle. I mean, like if you're like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna put on a blindfold. I'm standing in the middle of the lab, put on a blindfold, and I'm gonna spin 3 times and then pick a direction and walk in that direction. And it's like you probably won't get to go very far. You'll go 100 feet, and then you'll just be in such thick brush you can't go any farther.
Yeah.
Whereas on base camp, you can do the same thing, and it's like you can go as far as you want. Just keep going as much as you want, all the way to the edge of the property, no problem.
Yeah.
Um, which I don't know how to. I think I got to make a podcast that's nothing but our choreography document here, because I find that I'm still having to tell people when they arrive, Montana is a castle law state. And on top of that, so basically what that means is that if you wander onto somebody else's property and that property owner sees you and they feel threatened, they get to shoot you down, kill you, and they could even keep shooting after you're dead if they want. It's totally legal. And it's like the moral of the story is stay on the property. Um, and the other thing is like the property boundaries on the lab are not well marked, but that's another side of it, is that in Montana you have to know where you're standing. You do not rely on signs. So people are thinking like, well, I'll just wander along until I encounter a sign that says no trespassing, and then I'll stop, or maybe a fence or something like that. And it's like, nope. You could try that if you want, but you could get shot doing that. Not a good choice. So I'm kind of amazed that we have to keep, every time somebody new shows up, we have to kind of go through the whole choreography. We email it when we're giving them information on how to get here and everything, but I don't know. At the moment, they just want to know the directions. They don't want to read all this choreography stuff.
Yeah,
So,
people don't take it seriously all the time, or some people do and some people don't, but you don't know who's going to take it seriously until it's too late.
yeah.
How many people have been shot at your property?
Zero people during the whole time I've owned the property. 0 people have been shot.
I feel like that's an important thing to put out there.
That's true.
True.
That's true. Uh, uh, the problem is that I see people wandering onto somebody else's property, and I try to say, don't do that. And their response is universally, don't worry about it, Paul. You worry too much. Okay. It's not a big deal. Okay. And then the next thing is that when one of my neighbors chooses to not kill you, which is their legal right, then they believe I owe them something now. Remember that time I didn't kill that guy? You owe me. So stop wasting my future coupons on dumb fuckery. Just don't go over there, okay? So
yeah, it's like you have to make a fence to keep people in your property, not to keep people out from beyond.
Right. That's a good point. Like the threat of death is not enough, and then it's like for all of the state of Montana, people are dying over this stuff. People are getting shot, and so it's kind of like it's not like, and granted, here that hasn't been an issue. It hasn't come up. No one's gotten shot. No one's had a bullet headed in their general direction or anything. So it's kind of like, all right, okay, fair enough. And at the same time, it's like there was a time like 5 or 6 years ago, we had an event and a couple of women decided to go for a walk. And they walked onto a neighbor's property, and the neighbor saw them and said, what the fuck are you doing here? Well, we're part of Paul Wheaton's thing. We're just out for a walk. Well, you are not on Paul Wheaton's property. You're on my property. And if you don't get the fuck off of my property, I will kill you. Oh, you will not. And then he pulled out his sidearm and pointed it at him. And they finally decided to leave. And it's like, really? It's like, so I feel like, and then after that, this guy has brought it up like 8 times that he didn't kill people. He didn't kill my people. And so I owe him. And it's like, fuck. So it's like, no, that those women were in the wrong. I don't know how it could have been more emphatic. And it's and there's people in Montana who still do this. They'll wander on other people's property with the whole concept of like, yeah, they're not going to actually shoot. I can go anywhere I want. No one's going to actually shoot. And yet people die every year from exactly that. I'm baffled. Maybe people just don't value their own hide that much. Like, I was thinking of committing suicide anyway, so, might as well.
Yeah, people get used to different, I don't know, call them standards, but come from different parts of the country and are just not used to, say, Montana or anywhere else, right? You
Yeah.
grew up a certain way and you're used to uh, how things are where you're from, and then you go somewhere new and it can be different, and you
Yeah.
just don't take it seriously until it's right in your face.
Right. And then your first thing to do is denial.
Right.
Nuh-uh. That is
Right.
not true. You just making that shit up.
I do not consent to you shooting me.
Yeah.
It's
Around here, I feel like you're harassing me. I want you to stop. It's like, yeah, well,
Yeah, I just kind of, it's a different set of laws. And yeah, there's a lot of places in the United States where it's like the law is that you don't get to shoot anybody no matter what. And so then people, I don't know, you can go tromping around on somebody's private property and it's like, you knowing that you will never get shot unless, and I think this is another thing to keep in mind, like in the state of Oregon, I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to shoot anybody no matter what. And I kind of feel like in a lot of Eastern Oregon, if you go tromping on somebody else's private property, they might shoot you anyway. Like, and they may or may not know the law themselves, the person with the gun. And it's like, they just decide that they've decided to shoot you because, they felt it was a form of self-defense, or who knows what their justification was. But I just kind of feel like there's enough people out there that are a little bit crazy, why go push those buttons?
yeah. And to assume that people are going to only point a gun at you um, based off of what the law says is not always accurate. And
That is so true.
but I tell you, I've had a gun pointed at my face at pretty close range, and the person wasn't goofing around, and it's a great deterrent for whatever you might have been doing to get you to stop.
I think that's a good point. I mean, it's I'm amazed that we don't need more police because of the crazy, like the number of people that I've met where it's kind of like, how is it that you are not currently in jail? Like, the choices that you make. I am amazed. All right, we've kind of gotten off the topic a little bit.
Yeah. All right.
But
Deep
that is
soil.
a regional thing. When you're shopping around for land, it might be a good thing to consider, And you know what? The last podcast we did talk about the Department of Making You Sad, and it's like you've mentioned HOAs, and I kind of feel like, you know what, an HOA or the Department of Making You Sad, which is an HOA is just a closer up Department of Making You Sad. And we talked about Mike Ayler's property, and I kind of feel like there's an upside and a downside, So it's kind of like, if the laws in Mike Ayler's region were stricter, that guy wouldn't have been allowed to dump all that toxic waste on the uphill side of Mike's property and thus foul the drinking water for the entire neighborhood if there were stricter laws. On the other hand, when there are stricter laws, suddenly every project you want to do costs twice as much because you got to get permission. And of course, the number one rule is thou shalt never innovate. And so it's like, if you want to try and make something better, you're not allowed to. It's against the law. So because, of course, what we want to do is a lot of innovation, we elected to move someplace where, we're going to have very little of that. And most of our neighbors are the U.S. government. who has a big chunk of land which they only look at once every 15 years or so. So it's like, oh, okay, there's an easy neighbor.
So having neighbors with a bunch of junk in their yard is a good sign as long as they're downhill from you.
Oh, that kind of, I mean, that kind of brings up one of the first things I brought up last week, which was that having a neighbor who's hostile. If you've got a hostile
Yeah.
neighbor, man, that makes it really icky and difficult.
That's hard to find out too. I mean,
So a bunch of stuff in their yard, that doesn't mean that they are hostile or are not hostile, but clearly
right.
they appreciate a certain aesthetic that includes, you know, basically because with a junkyard and all that petroleum there, there's probably a
Mhm.
fair bit of it that's working its way into the soil, which
True.
might mean the drinking water, your drinking water.
But at least there isn't an HOA saying you're not allowed to have junk in your yard.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I think you can
That's
get
true.
from
That's
seeing
true.
that.
There, yeah. As long as that junk's there, your Wolfati is pretty safe.
That's true.
So maybe. I mean, the building codes don't dictate how many cars are allowed in your front yard in whatever assembled states, you know.
Mine did in San Diego.
Well, yeah, San Diego is a little different.
So, by the way, I with San Diego, I think the way to spell it is first Sandy for Sandy, and then EGGO. That's San Diego.
Yeah.
That is correct. That is the preferred way of spelling it.
That is the correct spelling. The fancy hoity-toity people spell it this other way with letters.
Yeah, in some
sense.
other language.
Yeah. So, all right. What's next?
Okay,
What's next on the
we
list?
talked about deep soil. Oh, wait, on deep soil, do you go out there with a shovel and dig down, or are you just looking around for rocks at the surface? Or
I think there's several properties that I visited where I did bring the shovel and I dug a hole.
yeah,
And I was gauging it on like how deep of a hole can I dig in like 2 minutes, and that would paint a picture. And then of course, what did I see in that? But at the lab, I did not dig a hole. It was the vegetation told the story, and so I could tell that there were incredibly deep soils there because of the jungle factor of the vegetation.
got it.
Yeah. So then at base camp, I wasn't looking for a property for the sake of the soil, but it did have a lot of weeds, which was like, oh, good. Love to see the weeds, you know. So this is a big positive. But I mean, like, I could see the bedrock everywhere, you know. I mean, hell, when you
Yeah,
drive up to the property, like the first thing you see is a wall of bedrock.
yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Okay,
all right, next.
next and the last two items on my list are about water on the property, about running water, ponds, wells. And I've seen a couple properties out here with springs on them as well, it seems like.
One of my podcasts from 9 years ago is with Jacqueline and Joseph Freeman, and they are near Battleground, Washington, which is a little north of, I think they're a little northeast of Vancouver, Washington, which is
Correct.
just across the river from Portland, Oregon. And so they are in your neighborhood, only they're totally not. So they're like, you're looking at Western Washington, kind of middle-ish.
I've absolutely been looking in that area.
Oh, you have been looking there. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
They're in Western
I'm
Washington,
going
but
down to like Eugene as far south as I've been looking.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Eugene, Oregon is, I believe, an hour and a half south of Portland. Is that correct?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So, uh, uh, so Battleground is Western Washington, but you are moving east enough that you're getting into the Cascades a little bit.
Yeah.
And so, uh, Central Washington, which people who live in Western Washington call it Eastern Washington, but Central Washington is a fucking desert. Fair?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, super deserty. Like they probably get, I mean, sagebrush, nothing growing, maybe 2 to 3 inches of rainy year. And then you get
Yeah.
into, and the same goes for Oregon, Washington and Oregon both. And then you get into the very eastern edge, like the eastern 10%, and then that's where the Rocky Mountains start to pick up, and it greens up a lot right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of farms, big farms growing wheat and all sorts of monocultures out there as you head towards your neck of the woods.
Now, I'm going to get, do you have a fresh memory of the podcast that I made with Jacqueline and Joseph Freeman about their hunt for a property?
No, I actually wrote down uh, their names so I could go back and search for it and listen to it again.
Okay, okay. So my memory is that they had been searching for property for years, and they had, I don't know, I'm gonna guess that they had looked at maybe 50 to 100 properties. I mean, it was a lot.
Yeah.
And as part of their requirements, they required a creek of some kind of moving water, the absolute requirement for them. But the property that they ended up on, the property where I'm interviewing them, does not have any running water whatsoever. And now, okay, now forgive me. I feel like a lot of my stuff is very brown permaculture, but I think we all have a bit of a purple streak. And I'm going to go into Purple Town for a moment here.
Okay.
They got onto their property, onto this property, which was for sale, and it just had a vibe. And they knew that they were going to live there. There's just some vibe, just some
I
kind
understand
of,
that. Yeah.
there's something about it that just was magic and beauty and wonderful to them, and they could not describe it. There was something right. And so there were several elements about the property that were like violations of their must-haves, including having water on their property. And in the podcast, I do state that there are several magical things about this property. And I think a lot of the magical things did come with the property. And there are a lot of magical things that they added to the property. And the podcast talks about each of those. Just a quick couple of little bits about the property. So, for example, when they moved into the house, there are two things about this house that they moved into that came with the house as is. One is on one wall of the house, there is a colony of honeybees living in the wall. And so when I was first there, when I first met
I
Jacqueline,
remember this now. I remember that.
she said, put your hand here. And it was wintertime. It was like February when I was there. Put your hand here. And I said, it's warm. This wall is way warmer than where we're standing. Where we're at, it's like 60 degrees, 55. It's a pretty cool house. And she says, there's a colony of bees in the wall. And they heat it. They live at a temperature that's much, much warmer. And so they're keeping their colony warm, and you can feel the warmth. That was item one. Item two is that I'm paying to stay there a night during a Sepp Holzer event that's in the area. And she says, we have 2 rooms available and you can choose which room you want to be in. We got a normal room and then we have the ladybug room. What is the ladybug room? Why do you call it that? She says, let me show you. And so we go into this room and there's a towel kind of wadded up in the corner of this room and it's hanging, but it's kind of like all foldy and stuff, you know? And she kind of pulls it back and there's like, I don't know, 600 ladybugs, live ladybugs, kind of on the other side of this towel. And she says, there are millions of ladybugs living in this wall, and there's a little hole there, and a few of them have come out into the room. And so we kind of put this towel here to kind of help them stay on the other side of the towel rather than fill the room. Well, I'm going to stay in the ladybug room, of course. You know, the
Yeah.
the room of magic, the magic ladybug room. Third thing is that in the summertime, every day at 5 o'clock, they open up all the doors for the whole house, including the doors to the outside. And a bat flies in and eats all the bugs and flies out. Like the bat flies in and goes to every room and finds every bug and eats them all and then flies back out of the house. So that, I'm not sure whether I can say that that was there when they got there, or I mean, clearly they have to open the door for that to happen.
Yeah.
And then, all right, one last bit is, of course, I do have a podcast where I go into a great deal of detail about Jacqueline's book, The Song of Increase. And that is a rather purple book. And it's kind of like there's clearly some magic happening there for her to be able to write that book. And so, did it come with the property? How much of it was something that came with the property, and how much of it was something that came with Jacqueline and Joseph? So, all right. Now, I've said the magical things. Now I'm going to go back to what you're talking about: water on the property.
Mm-hmm.
In that podcast I did with them, they said that they had a friend who is like also shopping, or I don't know what, but anyway, there's this person that they know that has water on their property, and it's like they struggle to keep any animals because the water attracts all the predators. I mean, the water attracts everything,
Everything. Yeah.
which attracts all the predators. And so it's like they've got a predator freeway in their backyard, which makes it very challenging to keep any kind of animal. Now, the next thing is that I know on Mount Spokane, I had a seasonal creek. And because it was seasonal, then there were rules I had to live by within 100 feet of that creek. And then there's a different set of rules for, I think, 200 feet, and another set of rules for 500 feet. And if it's a year-round creek, it's like all those rules plus a whole lot more. Plus, for a lot of states, and it might even be all of the United States, and I'm not certain about this, if a creek could carry fish, the public is allowed onto your property to fish, to go fishing. And maybe they're not going to even go fishing, but they're allowed to be there. And all that implies, and all those vectors. But if you don't have a creek, then no worries. They can't come on. You have private property. They stay out. So I have talked to some people who had a seasonal creek or a year-round creek, and it went through part of their property, and their entire property, and they had like 5 or 7 acres or something like that.
Yeah.
But their entire property fell under these massive regulations on what they could do.
Right.
Rob Torcolini has that YouTube channel uh, called Web for Deb or something like that, and he has a dome greenhouse, and apparently uh, this dome greenhouse, like this edge of the greenhouse, might be within 1 mile of a creek of a certain size, and therefore falls under all these weird laws that he might possibly be violating and he might not be. But it's, if I remember correctly from a private conversation I had with him, it was like a 3-year battle costing him, I don't know, like $20,000, $30,000, only to get it super duper duper surveyed and find out that the line was something like 20 feet away from his building. And it wasn't until that moment that the lawsuits went away.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Okay. So the thing is that he built a greenhouse, and then somehow somebody decided to turn him in. Like, probably, I'm going to guess what happened is somebody said, you have to do what I say or else. And Rob says, my land, fuck off. And so then they called up and reported him for having built a greenhouse in the middle of a creek or a river. And it's like the Department of Making Use Ed looks into it, and they said, yes, your greenhouse intersects this creek. What we mean by that is that the creek is a mile away and you're within a mile, and therefore sadness. And so it took him 3 years and I think about 20 grand to fight it, until the surveyors came out and basically proved that his greenhouse was something like 20 or 30 feet past, beyond the line. So rather than his greenhouse being entirely within the line, or the line intersecting his greenhouse, the line is outside of his greenhouse. So he's safe from these extra laws. But it took this enormous amount of money and 3 years in order to be able to fight that, and then eventually win. But all I'm saying is that I have talked to people where basically they bought property and it had a creek in it, and they were so happy and they had all these ideas and all these things that they wanted to do, and they couldn't even grow a garden because apparently somebody somewhere had an interpretation that a garden would violate something about the riparian area that is within a certain number of feet of this little creek.
Got it. So buyer beware with creeks. There might be
It could be. Now,
biting off more than you.
all that said,
with those.
what if we use permaculture techniques to create a creek where there is no creek?
Right.
And it's an artificial construct. We can do whatever we want. We can have a creek and do whatever we want with it. Ta-da! So, did I answer? Did I answer the question that you had, or did you have a different kind of question about creeks?
That I didn't have a specific question. It was, what do you think about creeks?
Love creeks. Man, I also love dodging the stomach ache that can come with them. And so Sepp's property is dry, and all the water that flows on Sepp's property is artificial. He put it there. The lab is dry. And so all the water that'll be moving on there will be artificial. And we hope to have water on there someday. Base camp is also dry, but I'm not sure how much water we'll get to have moving here, but I do hope that someday we have some tiny ponds and there is water moving around the property.
Excellent. What about wells? How much? I mean, it's going to depend on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just why don't you, you know?
If
I
there's
know
a
you've had some
well,
recent.
yeah, got
issues.
lots of stories to tell about wells. So many. Uh, Basically, drilling a well is always a gamble, and
Yeah.
so how deep is your well? What's going to be the quality of the water? Things of that nature. Sometimes, if a property is for sale, there's going to be the you say, why is the property for sale? The answer that you get might be different from the reality. I mean, there's a lot of properties where the well is dry, but I mean, there's something to be said for a certificate of occupancy. Is there a certificate of occupancy? And the certificate of occupancy says the well must produce this much water. And I believe that to get a certificate of occupancy, the well must produce a minimum of 3 gallons per minute. And I know I say this and I share this because with the property at base camp, there was no certificate of occupancy, and there is a well. It produces a third of a gallon per minute, 1/10 of the water that's required to get a certificate of occupancy. Now, both of you have been here during events. And then when the event begins, I stand up and I remind everybody that we have very little water here. And so I wish to encourage everybody this will be your week to try poolless. So now you're going to take a much shorter shower. And everybody might be wise to kind of tuck away a gallon of water just in case we run out, for a gallon of drinking water. So I'm guessing both of you remember this little speech I gave at the very beginning of the events you attended.
I've been poolless since the PD or since I was there the first time.
How's it going?
It's as far as my hair and my beard and smelling, it's fine. I've got some skin issues that I don't think are related, but that were there before that didn't go away because of it. But my hair and my stink are no problem. I've got tons of hair that's very luxurious and a very luxurious beard.
So basically the overall quality of your life from the perspective of stinkums and cleanliness and luxuriance has improved.
I would think so, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm a little surprised at how well I'm doing in that space also. And I think we just got to keep pointing out, how well it works and for people to make the leap. And it's like, and when you make the leap and the quality of everything gets better, it's kind of like, oh man, why was I rubbing that toxic gick all over myself? I mean, I bought the very least toxic gick I could find in this space, but apparently it too was still toxic. And, everything's just better. And it's like suddenly showers are shorter. I'm spending less money on stuff, and my health is better. I don't know. Everything's just better.
Less skunk that can clog up your drain as well.
Yes. Septic tank has to be happier. And I mean, one step closer to going into a gray water system, I mean, if you don't have that toxic gick to deal with, then, the gray water system is certainly going to be happier. All right. You were asking about wells, and I got to say that if there's already a functioning well there and it's bringing in 3 gallons a minute or better, that is a huge relief. That's one less stress. And I got to say that I think I've heard that like the number one reason why people get divorced is money issues.
Mm-hmm.
And out of the money issues department, I think I have heard, and I don't know how true this is or not, but the number one issue is um, any kind of construction or remodeling happening within the home. And
Okay.
so, because those things can be so very stressful. And then if you're trying to drill a well, and until the well is drilled, you're having to import water or something like that, then what an extremely stressful thing that can be. And so, and what a relief when the water flows. So, a property that already has a functioning well is worth a lot, because it's like you could look into whatever it costs to get that, and then and you could say like, well, if I had to drill another one, it would cost just simply that, and then I would have it. And it's kind of like, yeah, but that isn't it at all. When you're starting to drill, you don't know how much it's going to cost. It could cost that, or it could end up costing 20 times that. And so you don't know. It's a gamble. And it's like that kind of gambling is very stressful.
Yeah, you don't know how much or how deep that water is. If you pick the right spot or not, you might have to drill 10 times or 5 times deeper than you think, and you still may never get it, and you have to pay the money.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know if it's available everywhere, but I know in Washington State, well reports are they're all public. They're searchable.
Mhm.
So there's a website that I've gone on in the past, and that you have a map and it has little points on it. You click on the point, and it shows you the well report for the well that is there.
Yeah, I used that as well when I was looking for properties, and found a spot where there were wells on all 4 sides of the property that they all were reported like 60 to 70 foot depths for their water level. And that is reassuring, at least that, on average, you should be lucky.
And then what kind of water do you get out of it? That's a
Yeah.
great question.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of
Yeah, I've
people.
seen that in well reports. They'll have the water will be tested for iron and bacteria and other things that'll kill you.
I mean, I'm sure you've both been to houses where it's like, here, you want a glass of water, and it's like you bring the glass up to your face, and your nose says, "Do not put that in your pie hole. That doesn't go
Yeah.
there. That's
Yeah.
doesn't no." And they say, "Oh, we drink it all the time. It's fine." And your nose is saying, "Don't, don't, no, 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 don't." And then there's people that have rust, or they have hard water, or they have got, I mean, all these different people having all these different possible problems with water. And then, of course, I'm sure you've seen the videos of people where fracking has happened in their area, and they can turn their faucet on and light the water on fire.
Yep. It's no longer drinking water. It's just water.
Yeah, yeah.
It's mostly water.
Right. To call it water, it only has to be 51% water. Right.
And then there's
Technically.
people where they pump the water up and it is cloudy. And there's many different flavors of cloudy, like cloudy, like there's clay in it, cloudy. And yeah, many different kinds of different kinds of cloudy. So adventures in water. So yeah, if there's a well with good water, that is very valuable, very valuable, so much more valuable than whatever it costs to put in a well. I mean, that's a lot of great information there. Okay, I could talk more about well stuff, but I think did I give you enough information for wells?
I think that's a good little talk about that. And then what I had left is I found some properties this weekend that I thought I might bring them up, and we'll talk about these specific ones if there's not any
I think that
general.
that's good. Is there anything else that was inside of my stuff um, about searching for property?
We've gone through my notes
Oh, okay, all right.
on that. So
Because I
if there was something else, it was probably boring.
oh really? Because I was thinking that because it's a three-part thing that I
Uh
did,
huh.
and
Yeah.
I seem to remember that part three, the last part, because I kind of feel like a lot of people are looking at land and it's kind of like, you know, um, of course, what they want is they want to buy a piece of property that already has a house to get started with, and they might like 10 or 20 acres, and a creek would be lovely, and they've got the fantasy of what all they want to do and what they want to buy and things of that nature. And then they go shopping and they're seeing prices like 400,000, 800,000, stuff like that, and they're like, I can't afford this. And then there's a bunch of people where they're kind of thinking along the lines of like, maybe they'll keep working while living the homesteading dream. And I would even have to go so far as to guess that three-quarters of the people that make the leap do exactly that. They try to get a piece of property that's close enough to town so that they could live there and then do the homesteading dream on the evenings and weekends. And then they'll continue to work, and then they'll use that money to pay the mortgage. And in theory, in 30 years, they'll be square, and then maybe they can live full time on the property. And of course, that is a path, and I'd like to advocate something smarter, but that's a different podcast, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and then the
So
thing I try to get to is like as I'm describing this, and people are like, I just don't have this much money. Then I've done the Deep Roots program, and I'm trying to make it so that it's easier for people, because you go out and you do if you go out on your own and you get that 10 acres, and like let's say you found something for $140,000 for your 10 acres and it's bare land, and of course you're surrounded by sprayers, and you get to deal with the department of making you sad, and you're finding out that there's reasons that it was $140,000 instead of $400,000, and all of those adventures. Um, and so what I'm trying to do is to put something together where all of your neighbors, on my land are all permaculture enthusiasts, and not just permaculture enthusiasts, but permaculture enthusiasts of a very, very specific flavor. And and there is an HOA, and the HOA's name is Paul. And and it's like if you do something that violates the HOA rules, which are listed in 500 podcasts, um, then you could get kicked out, which is like an uncomfortable feeling, unless of course you're thinking like these HOA rules are awesome, and then in which case you're like, therefore, if somebody moved in next to me and they didn't stick to the HOA rules, they would get kicked out, and I would be glad that they did. Something like that. So that was the boring part, I guess. I was trying to make it so it was easier for people to make this leap. And I thought when we got to the end of the podcast that's what I was going to be talking about, was like the Deep Roots program at my place.
absolutely, let's talk about that. I've looked into that, discussed it with my partner, and uh, and it's not for us. But we also have a bit of a grub stake to go out and buy our own land outright,
Right.
and not be in the rat race while we're doing this, and not be under the iron gauntlet of Paul Wheaton and his locked gates.
Yeah, my locked gate. It's that locked gate sneaks up on you in the middle of the night and eats your children. Yeah.
It's coming right for us.
Run away. So, yeah, no, it's very strict, very strict. And I get some people that are very angry with me, and they say, you would get a lot more people if you would allow smoking. And I say, you are so right. I would. And I'm okay with having fewer people. Oh, you would get so many poor people if you allowed pot. It's like, yep, you're right. I would. And yet I'm gonna hang on to that one. And in the past, that's what we had. Is we had some people that felt like I needed to change these rules, and they said, obey or else. And it's like, well, I guess I'll take or else. And then the rest of that story. So
Oh yeah.
yeah.
When you try to explain to somebody, the smoking and pot smoking, whatever it is they're smoking, you do have to also address the fact that they would be doing it out in the middle of 200 acres that could be very dry, and it could be during fire season. And once a little fire starts, how are you going to put that out? Are you going to run back hundreds of yards to find a fire extinguisher? Are you going to try to get water to that? Or most likely, you're going to wait for the fire department to come in with an airdrop of water and charge you $50,000 a load to put out that fire because somebody wanted to have a cigarette on the property.
See, I don't think we have that problem really, because if it's the driest time of the year and you go onto the lab, it's still green and lush. I mean, because I think it's for a variety of reasons, but mostly because of the deep soil. So I kind of think that if a forest fire, a wildfire came to us, we would be immune. So I'm not too worried about that. Actually, I would have to say that the number one reason for the tobacco smoke and why I say no, the number one reason is I just don't like it. I just don't like tobacco in any form. I just don't like it. I don't.
Well, and you're trying to create. Part of what you're trying to create is your cure for cancer.
Exactly. That's
of such purity on your land that someone with stage 4 cancer can come there, and then in a couple weeks to a month, they're cured, and that's absolutely not going to happen when someone's smoking cigarettes sitting there blowing in your direction.
And there's my number 2 reason. So number 1, I just simply don't like it. And number 2 is I'm trying to do this health mecca thing. I have put so much of my life and my money and my everything into this project. And then I get somebody who shows up and they say, you can't tell me I can't smoke. And it's like, you're right, I can't, but I can tell you this: get the fuck off my land. I can't tell you that. And you know what? I'll give you a 5-minute head start before I start shooting.
Get out of my castle.
Because if you're still here in 5 minutes, I'm going to feel threatened that you're here. So
yeah, your life is at risk. Secondhand smoke kills. It's
yeah, you're threatening me with your smoke. But yeah, and it's like I can see in my mind's eye and I can only see this because I've seen it happen like 20 different instances of time. Like, hey buddy, hey, we're trying to do this carcinogenic free zone over here because this person over here has cancer. And so your smoking of that cigarette is cramp on our style. So we'd like to ask you to put it out. Oh, my smoking isn't fucking hurting anybody. it's my right to smoke and you can't stop me. And it's like, this isn't hurting anybody. You're just a fucking whiner. I know you have both observed this exact behavior before. Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. And it's like, I just don't want to have that discussion ever. I just don't. I've got other things to focus on. This is hard enough without adding that into it. And so, I'm trying something. I'm shooting for something, and I'm working on it here. And it's kind of like that whole element is like cramping my style. So, yeah, I have a bunch of difficult, challenging rules, and there are a very few people that are like cool with that. And if somebody is cool with that, I like to think that, like, if somebody is cool with it, like these rules are awesome, then I would think that they would be a fit for here, and they would like it here. And I think that the terms for the Deep Roots package is a sweet, sweet, sweet deal. Um, and so while you're looking for property, there's that, and I hope that someday that there'll be 100,000 properties like mine, each with a different story, and then people could like select from the buffet to go be part of. So as we're facing this thing where people are kind of like, wow, the price of property is through the roof. There's no way in all of my life I'll ever be able to make this leap. I think that, yeah, and I'm working my ass off to come up with solutions for that. So there's Deep Roots. There's also the Skip program, which I think a lot of people don't believe is true. And I don't know, have you guys ever met somebody that
Yes, I
is looking
have.
for somebody? Yeah.
I posted on the forum. Somebody was asking about conveniently how many acres should they get if they wanted to homestead. And so I brought up our previous recording of this, and I did find a little YouTube video. There was a property, this couple, they called it Heartwater Farm in Utah. And when I went to visit, they said they were looking for interns with the intent that they would like it there and want to stay there, and that they could actually take over running that property the same way.
Yeah.
And at this point, unfortunately, I think they've already sold it because the wife had passed away and the husband couldn't maintain it. He was maybe in his late 60s. And but yeah, it was exactly that they were trying to find somebody that essentially they could give that property to, because they knew that it would continue to operate it the way they had.
So the subtitle on the book, the book is Skip, Skills to Inherit Property, but the subtitle is A Framework to Connect Industrious People with Elderly Landowners. And it is just, not only is it bizarre, a little odd to meet so many people that are looking for somebody young that'll step in and take over and keep it going. But it's like those that have tried, those that have gone through the pain of trying, how they've failed. Like they've tried and tried and tried, and it's like you would think that they would find somebody, and it's like there's always a story. And it's like, why can't I find somebody that'll just, get it and carry on? I mean, it doesn't seem like it'd be that hard, but there is this gap. There's this gap, this major gap. There's people that are young people that are like willing to do the work and everything, but there's so much they don't understand and so much. And it's like, well, then when do I get to play my video games? And it's kind of like, okay, I guess this isn't going to work out. And I don't know. And so I kind of feel like Skip really helps to fill it. So anyway, all right. I wanted to, I guess, hijack this podcast in order to talk about, like, I'm trying really hard to be helpful. The Deep Roots framework, I like to think that 5 years from now, what we will have accomplished here is so amazing that there will be 40 other properties that are adopting what we have started here. And so there'll be 40 other choices to go to for young people wanting to start on a path. And then even more than that, I would like to think that 5 years from now, that all of the skip stuff would have resulted in 3,000 connections between elderly landowners and young industrious people. And I think it's the industrious, which is the key ingredient. And I think a lot of young people desperately wish to be industrious and they don't know how to go about it. And then, and I think that a lot of elderly landowners are looking for somebody industrious. Their bar for industrious is really low. Like they'll take almost anything. So Mark, you were talking about the couple that you met, and they did have a bunch of interns out there. They did have a bunch of young people out there, and none of them worked out. True?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many interns that they had. They said they've had people out and they're still trying to find somebody. I
Yeah.
think this, when I was out there, was like maybe 2014. And, and so, yeah, they were trying to find somebody who was interested in continuing to maintain that property, because when they picked it up, half of the property was a parking area for semis, like a semi rest stop.
Oh.
And they were able to essentially restore that to where it was just this lush, great place. And talking about like um, the pasturing for cattle and things like that, having revolving pastures. And so they got all this property built back up, and they didn't want, like, their kids were not interested in it at all. That they're like, yeah, we'll sell it to whoever. So they were trying to find somebody who had similar interests and goals as they did. But I think what you run into is you get a lot of younger people will come out to a place with enthusiasm, but not really an understanding or the knowledge of what's really involved. And somebody says, oh, I want a homestead. And they don't realize just how much work can be involved depending on what you mean by homestead. And so skip can at least get people that knowledge of, they know how to do these things or they've done them. And yeah, you're going to have some who say, man, I have to do that much stuff to get that particular badge, or that just, it's sort of a representation of the actual work that would be involved down the road with a property like that. And maybe they realize, yeah, this isn't what I was thinking when I wanted to do this. And so the young person can also learn more about themselves of, yeah, this isn't what I really wanted to do, versus going out to a property and that property owner trying to teach them, here's all the things you need to know how to do. And then after a year's time or 6 months time, one of the other parties says, man, this is just not going to work out. So it's a great way to sort of save people from wasting time figuring it out on the fly.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like when there's drama, a lot of times the drama comes from, there's stuff to be done, and the person that you would think would do it, for some reason, they're not going to do it. They don't want to do it. And so insert drama here. And on the other hand, if you've got somebody who's an industrious person, they just step right up and get it done. And I think what we're trying to do with Skip is basically prove and document how industrious a person can be. And so it's like, this is clearly an industrious person. And so based on, so I want to, I've made some statements about the Skip program in the past, but for that couple that you're talking about right now, and it's like, because basically you would get this land for free. I'm going to say whatever the person would have inherited, I'm going to put a dollar value of $600,000 on the package, whatever it is. And I don't want to actually know what it really is, but I'm just going to say. And then let's suppose that we had a person on Permies that was PEP 2 certified. So this means that they've done enough work that would basically fill a summer. Like they worked on the PEP program hard for a summer. And so they would be PEP 2 certified. My guess is that couple back in 2014, if they could see this PEP 2 certified random person, that they would have said, yes, let's do this. Let's get the paperwork started. Do you think that that's a fair statement to make?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Because the people I've talked to are desperate. I mean, it's like a lot of them, it's like the government's just going to get my land. I just need somebody who can fog a mirror. But, I just kind of have to have some sort of reassurance that they're not just going to liquidate it for drugs, and like they'll actually stay here and do something, even if it's half-assed. I'm willing to settle so much. I'm willing to set the bar so incredibly low. I just need some way to just know that much. But I think PEP 2 certification, like to get PEP 2 certified, I'm going to have to guess that you will have to have completed 200 BBs. And there would be pictures, there'd be proof of these 200 BBs. And I would say that, okay, you could accomplish these 200 BBs in a summer, and then you would get $600,000 worth of property stuff. Probably some of it's even cash. I mean, that's got to be the highest dollars per hour for a person that age ever, I would guess. So, and I do think that as we travel this path more, it's going to require PEP 3 certification or PEP 4 certification. But I think out of the gate right now, I think the desperation of these elderly people is so high. I think PEP 2 will suffice. In fact, I would think that you'd probably be halfway to PEP 2 and get it worked out. All right. I feel satisfied that I got to say my thing.
Yes.
Kyle,
Yeah.
we shall now continue with what you would like to talk about, which is
Okay.
that you have found land and you wish me to look at it and tell you why it's a stupid choice.
All right. I'll switch the screen over to that. There we go.
Whereabouts is this land that you see?
This land is
Shelton,
out
Washington.
in Shelton, Washington, which is over on the Olympic Peninsula.
Ooh, sounds soggy.
It's pretty soggy, but that's okay. Or is it? I don't know.
Well, it's what you want. You're like, oh, soggy. That's my favorite flavor.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we've got pictures.
Like,
there's there's 4 lots available that just went up for sale.
How many acres is each lot?
Okay. This one here is 5 acres. And then this one here that it's kind of nestled in is 15 acres. A little thing went away. We'll go here. I haven't drawn out. So this one is 5. This one here that is nestled in is 15. And then there's 20 below that. And then all the way down here is this big 35 acres that I can't afford. So I'm just looking at these 3.
Okay. All right. Now, it's entirely plausible that you'll pick one of these to start with, and then 5 years from now, the land next door will become available for cheap.
Yeah.
because of how a lot of people make the leap and it doesn't work out. So,
Okay.
but the Olympic Peninsula, um, so for those people not familiar with the shape of Washington State, or for those that kind of are, Puget Sound kind of comes in from the northwest and then into the state. So that basically the Pacific Ocean, in a way, comes in and then it brings water to Seattle. So Seattle is actually like a couple of 100 miles inland from the ocean,
Yeah,
but it's like there's this huge bay of sorts, this
it's
crazy,
it's
enormous bay,
gigantic. Yes.
and that comes all the way over to Seattle.
And there's a lot of these little fingers and inlets that are, this is all, most of all the blue you see on here, most of it is salt water.
Yeah, yeah, it is salt water. It is definitely connected to the ocean, and it is
Yeah,
tidal. The tide comes and goes.
it is. Yes.
And this big blop of land um, to the west is called the Olympic Peninsula. And
Yep.
there are parts of it, the western side, that are super duper soggy.
Yeah.
And there's an authentic rainforest in there. And then when you get towards the east side, it dries out a fair bit.
True.
So and as part of it, so like there's the Hoh rainforest, but near the Hoh rainforest is this town called Forks, which the last time I went to the Hoh rainforest, it was hilarious because they've got all this vampire stuff everywhere as you're driving through the
Yep.
town, all alongside the roads, and um, and apparently it's because of this series of vampire movies or vampire books,
Yep.
and then it's like they all happen in Forks, Washington, because apparently that's the place that has the least sunshine in the United States due to all of this rain. And I guess vampires are cool with clouds and not okay with sunshine because they'll, I don't know, turn to dust in the sunshine, I'm guessing.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
I think it was something like they would start sparkling. I never got into those books or movies, but sparkly vampires, I think, was a big part
Oh,
of it.
kind of like how beam me up, Scotty, that kind of sparkling.
I don't know, I
Okay.
guess.
All right. Maybe that's it. They're just being beamed up or something. But okay. The thing is not a lot of sunshine, a lot of soggy, a lot of a lot of rain. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now you're looking at somewhere between 5 and 20 acres,
Yes.
and you're trying to make a choice. And do you
Yeah.
know for this particular property, like what the annual precip is?
I could look it up right quick.
Okay. While you're looking it up, I'm going to state that the annual precip for Seattle is 30 inches a year. And a lot of people are going to be listening to this thinking like, that's not that much. And it's like, you're right. I mean, Seattle is kind of famous for being a soggy, soggy city, but they actually don't get that much rain every year.
It was like 35 inches, maybe. It's overcast a lot, and they get like maybe light drizzles regularly, but not like heavy
That's
downpours as often, right?
exactly the weather that's going on outside my window right now. It's overcast and just kind of drizzling.
Now, we mentioned Eugene, Oregon earlier, and I actually lived in Eugene, Oregon for a couple of years, and it was driving me bonkers because it, it's like the weather can't be real weather. It's this almost constant. Not the word drizzle isn't even right. It's like wet
Misty.
fog. Yeah, misty.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
this wet fog, and it just keeps everything moist all the time. And it's not exactly raining. It's like this fog is like a heavy wet fog that's just kind of falling. And so you go outside and you get soaked, but there was no rain. It's I don't know if this makes any sense, but that's kind of what the moisture is like. A lot of the moisture is like in Seattle, but Eugene's even wetter. And if you're in Seattle, if you go east towards the Cascades, you'll get to 60 inches of rain just before
Oh
the
yeah.
Cascades. Now, this particular place looks like 62 inches of precip.
Yep.
That's a lot. That is some sogginess. That's double the sogginess of Seattle. Okay.
Correct.
Now, I'm not sure, like, in order to be called a rainforest, how much rain do you have to have? How much precipitation do you have to be a rainforest? Do you know? I think it's like more than 100 inches, maybe 150.
I'm not sure.
I am not certain, but for the whole rainforest, in fact, if you could Google it, what's the annual precip for the whole rainforest?
Yeah, parts of that in the actual mountain range, I thought they were over 200 inches.
It says
Yeah.
12 feet of rain, so
Oh,
144
44.
inches.
Okay. All right. All
And even gross.
right. Okay. So, um, you're at 60, so it's going to be pretty wet, and when it when it gets cold, like the coldest day of the year, the coldest moment of the year, the coldest temperature of the year is probably going to be something on the order of, I'm going to guess, 25 degrees, the coldest day. So now you're looking at a chart that's average. Okay, there it is. The cool season, the coldest day of the year is December 20th with an average low of 34. But now we're kind of talking about
Average.
average. Yeah.
So there's a little, like a low, looks like the bottom part of your statistical zone is around 25.
Yeah, I called it. Ha! Like a pro I am.
Look at
Okay.
you.
So all right. So you know, there will be freezing. It's just
Yes.
not often, and it won't be super frozen. However, you are going to have a lot of funguses. And I mean, as you live there, the things that you own that you're going to be constantly fighting mold. I'm going, I'm
Yeah.
doing like, I'm looking into the future with my third eye, I guess. I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'm probably offended people that are like into the third eye thing. I'm looking into the future, and I'm just kind of saying that the humidity is high, and all the conditions are just right. And your clothes that are in your closet, you're going to do your laundry, and then you're going to go get a shirt that's been hanging in your closet for 2 months, and oh no, it has mold on
Yeah.
it. And not only that, but like you're gonna dig out your whole closet to clean it, even though you just cleaned it 3 months ago, and you're gonna find actual mushrooms growing in your closet.
You're
All
going to be
right.
using a lot of borax when you're doing your laundry to try to minimize that.
Ooh, I want to say, I in this podcast I used to advocate the use of borax for controlling mold, and I want to instead now advocate the use of a product called EC3. And so basically, we had a couple of here in my house, and we're in dry country here in Montana. We don't get very much of this stuff, but we had like a couple of spots that would start to speckle with the mildew, which wanted to be mold. And so we would hit it with a layer of borax and leave a layer of borax on it, and then it would set it back for a couple of months, maybe even 6 months, and then it would come back. But we went on this trip, and we stayed in a house that was designed for people that are chemically sensitive. And they got to talking about how magical, there it is, there's a picture of it, of this stuff, EC3. And now that's the laundry additive. So you want this different thing. But these people that were chemically sensitive talked about what magic this is. And I have no idea what's in it. But these are people that are absolutely adamant about organic, and they are chemically sensitive, and they felt like, so we tried it here, and it's like we've used it in spots, and the mold has never come back. Granted, it's only had like a year or a year and a half, but it still hasn't been back. And it's like in those spots, but we're also like a very dry area, so not very prone to molds. But it's possible that if for where you're going to live, this is going to become a regular product for you. I'd be very curious to hear from a chemist about what's in this and their analysis of it. But that's another podcast for another day. All right. Kyle, I believe you're
Yes.
asking me to look at your situation and make whiny sounds because you're thinking that I might make some whiny sounds that you hadn't thought of yet. Is that
Absolutely. Yeah.
okay? All right. All right. So
So
I'm whining
mold,
about mold, and at the same time,
moistness.
and then Mark is wisely saying, borates, borax powder, things of that nature. And Mark, you also know why I discourage it or suggest people use a minimal amount of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is toxic,
It has
mildly
a
toxic, but still toxic.
yes, exactly. It is mildly toxic. Its toxicity is so low. Many people errantly refer to it as non-toxic, but it is toxic. And so therefore I'm kind of thinking like, can I get away from this stuff? Can I, And so I'm not sure what the toxicity level of EC3 is, but the fact that it works so effectively, so long term, and it has this endorsement from these people that are chemically sensitive. I don't know. I'm now exploring it. I'm now trying it out. Um, I think I'm overdue to record a brand new podcast about cleaning with cleaners you can eat, and but that's another podcast for another day. All right. These 3 properties,
Right.
5 acres, 15 acres, and 20 acres.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm.
when you were showing them, it showed the price tags on them too. I don't know
Yep.
if you wish us to pretend like we don't see those, or if you want to.
I don't care. We can talk about that.
Okay.
There you go.
I thought it was interesting, like what the prices were. So you're saying, there you go. I don't see the change yet on my screen.
Wait. Oh, I still have you on the micro balance. No, I have you on.
I
No,
was
I
looking at a
see the
map.
properties on the
There they
right
are.
and the
Now I
map
see
on the
them.
left. Yeah.
Now I see them. Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, there's.
So 5 acres is 150,000.
No,
No, wait,
there.
that's 15.
Let's
15
see.
acres.
Sort by price. Can we do that? Well, it's not doing it. Yeah, 5 acres is 95, 15 is 150, and 20 is 175.
Okay. All right. All right. Notice how the price per acre drops dramatically as you add acres.
Yes.
I think that's kind of the normal price when you're shopping for land. But okay, 5 acres. So it's about 20 grand per acre for 5 acres, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And
19 grand it works out per acre on that one. The next one is 10 grand per acre for the 15 acres. And the 20 acres is 8,750 per acre.
okay. All right. All right. Now, um, it seems like for one of those, you had some pictures up, and we were looking at the pictures go by
Yeah.
earlier. Can we pop
Uh,
those?
yeah, I've got pictures. Let's see.
And are the 2 larger properties that look like there's a creek, or at least where a creek would be, going through the 2 of
Yes.
them?
Okay.
So there's a big ravine going through the 15 acre. You see it here. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now I don't see a picture anymore.
there's a big ravine going through it here that goes through the 15 acres and then through the 20 acres, and that's got a creek in it. And then there's a second creek on the 20 acres that comes in and goes through here.
Okay.
You
All
can
right.
see that. And then there's this big, ugly looking, but also kind of awesome looking bridge across the ravine there.
It looks like there's a lot of little houses in the area. Is that what I'm seeing? Like, or am I? See, so it looks like you can
Yeah.
kind of see a bunch of little houses around these acres.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What's this? What are we
Those-
looking at here? What is
This
this?
is Google Maps. I was just showing there's like a housing complex a little bit across the street that's a little fancy.
Okay.
And then
I was
so
asking about something that looked like a bridge. It looked like a trail on a bridge.
this,
Yeah, that's the 20-acre property.
yeah. So the 20 acres has, let's see,
A steel logging bridge, it says.
yeah, it has this trail that starts. There's a driveway that goes down the west side of the 15 acre property, comes down, and these neighbors to the west of that use that driveway,
Okay.
and then it splits and it kind of cuts across the 15 acre down here at the bottom, goes, and then that's where you see it here, goes through the 20 acres and then continues down to that 35 acres. So I think there's an easement where whoever buys the 35 acres would be coming through, or would be able to come through the 20 acres
All right.
across this awesome bridge.
So I need to point out, I think that when you pull up a new image, maybe it takes it 10 seconds until I see that image. So
Hmm.
Okay,
as you're
I'll go
pointing and talking
slowly.
about stuff. So here's what I was trying to do. Is I was trying to say like, okay, here's a bridge. It looks
Yes.
like there's a trail on that bridge, but is it wide enough for a car?
It would be wide enough for, I was say like one of those old like Rangers, like a Ford Ranger, or like at the old Tacomas that were kind of smaller wheelbase. But I don't know if you would be able to get like an F-150 across it without hitting the sides.
I think what I hear you saying is like if you had a golf cart, you could probably drive that across.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's more like a bike ped bridge of sorts.
Now, are you sure that it's that narrow though? Because that seems to be the only access to the 35-acre property.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be 10 foot wide or maybe even wider.
Well, I went there, and that's kind of my
Oh,
estimation.
okay.
I'm going back today when my wife gets off of work because she was working yesterday. She couldn't go, so we're going to go look at it again. I could bring a tape measure and measure it. It's probably a good idea.
Because that seems to be the primary access to the 20-acre property is across that bridge to get to most of the
Right.
property.
The 35 acre, actually, there's a nice road that heads down like away from these properties. There's a nice road that heads down to the beach that they have access to. They can take that across there.
Okay.
This would be, I think that would be their primary access, but who knows?
Because one of the things that since there's nothing developed on that property, fire service doesn't need to have access. But I think once you build a structure, then you also have to put in a driveway that's wide enough to support, say, a fire engine coming down the driveway and then having the ability to turn around at the end, at least in some areas. I thought that's
Right,
what I read
right.
for Washington State's requirement. So that bridge might not actually be sufficient. So then you would actually have to put in a second bridge to cross that ravine
Yeah.
to
Good,
get
good
to
to
your
know.
house. So you could be looking, and it has to be structurally sound to support a fire engine. So that could be, a major construction project.
Right, right, right. That's good. I did not think of that.
All right. I kind of want to. I'd like to go back to the one with the bridge,
Okay.
and so I kind of feel like this is pretty typical of the stuff that you see in that area, um, where you have a lot of big ass trees, and it's beautiful. It's green and lush. This is clearly a picture taken in the winter, right? Um, but I can't. I'm going to say that all those trees are going to fill out, and it's going to become a jungle. But but here's the big thing, because we're looking at it as permies, right? We got stuff to do. We want to grow our own food and things like that, and we want to have a magnificent garden. We want to have a food jungle. We've got all these ideas for stuff. So step one, and I think part of what you said is there is a creek there. Is it a year-round creek?
Um, well, it's kind of hard to tell. It has rained recently,
Okay.
but it has usually always throughout the year have rained recently. So this one looks more permanent than the second one. That's a little further down the road.
I'm also
I,
noticing all that moss that's on those trees in that picture and all the moss that's on the bridge.
Yeah.
So what Paul's talking about, yeah,
yep.
you're going to constantly have that growing there.
Um, okay. You just said something about something that looks more permanent or something. What do you mean by that?
Right. So let's go to this picture. There a picture of a map?
I see a
That little
picture of a
blue
map.
line.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this right here. That's the what you were just looking at with the bridge is
Okay.
crossing this ravine here. And there's
Right.
a um, second creek down the road a little bit that looks like it might be seasonal, but it's hard to tell. It doesn't have that
Oh,
same deep ravine that
so
goes along with this first one.
so by permanent, what you're trying to say is the creek, like
The
the
creek,
water in
yes.
the creek. Like there's water in the creek year round versus seasonal.
Yeah, what
Okay.
were you
I,
talking about?
I thought you were talking about like the bridge. There's a more permanent bridge. Like this
Oh,
bridge
no,
is temporary. And it's
no,
like,
no.
all right.
That's the only bridge.
Okay. Could we return to the picture of the bridge, please?
Bridge.
All right.
Bridge.
Okay. We're looking at the picture of the bridge, and I'm trying to comment on the growies. So I'm seeing a lot of trees, a lot of brush. This is winter time, and to add to what Mark has said, look at the bridge itself. There's a lot of moss and green slime and stuff like that on the bridge itself. And
Yes.
because it's just this is kind of what the area is like, and um, but I think an important thing is that whether this creek is seasonal or year round, there's probably laws around that. So I know that in Washington State that there's a lot of stuff like they want to bring back the salmon. And for a lot of what they're doing, it's like they have a strong focus on like we have to keep these creeks cold. And the way that we do that is we have a lot of trees around the creeks,
Hmm.
and they're going to help to keep that water as cold as possible while it's headed towards the ocean, which is very close by. So it seems like this is what a lot of the new laws in the state of Washington are about is keeping that water cold. and so they are going to be pretty restrictive on what you can do as a permie anywhere near that. Now, I seem to remember a picture that featured something or like there was a little bit of a meadow, but I'm not sure. Can we
Uh,
find that
so
one?
I think that was on, let's see, there's this picture. This is more of the road on the 15 acres. Yeah, there was a kind of a bigger meadow right
Okay.
off the road.
There, this picture right here. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, looking at the growies that are growing right there, I kind of wonder if this little meadow gets flooded in the spring.
There are some there are some puddles. There's a big section of that that has puddles in it when
All
I
right.
went there.
So I kind of suspect that trees are not currently growing because, like, everywhere you look, there's lush, thick forest,
Hmm.
but not in this spot. And it's like
Right.
I don't see a lot of stumps, and so my guess is that what's going on here is that this gets flooded, and that the trees do not care for that flooding, and so they don't live there. Like
Mm.
they're trying to move in, but they keep dying from getting flooded out. All right. At the same time, so at the same time, how this meadow, how far away is it from the nearest creek?
Okay. I'll go to the map. We'll go
No, no,
up
no! Don't go to
here.
the map. Make a guess. Make a
Take
guess.
a guess.
Ah, see
Um,
now I'm losing my track of
sorry.
everything again.
Sorry. We're back to the meadow. I would say this meadow is about 300 feet to that big ravine.
Oh, so now I do think that a good question for your real estate agent would be
Yes.
like what are the laws about usage? How, like, what can I do with this, and what can I not do with this by being within 500 feet of that creek?
Yeah.
That would be a good thing to be finding out, because Washington has a lot of laws, um, and so there's that. But let's step back and look at it from the perspective of a permie. Oops, I lost the image again.
Uh, yeah. Is it back? I put it. It was off for a second, and then
Okay, now it's back.
there we go. There it is. Okay.
Okay, from the perspective of a permie, I kind of feel like, okay, one of the things is you're probably not going to have a lot of trouble with wind here. Your Okay, I lost the picture again. I don't know.
It'll be back up in a second. You're on like a
There, all right.
30-second delay. I measured it on the map, and it's 500 feet from the
Okay.
from the
All right.
ravine.
So, ignoring that stuff for a moment, I'm going to say, all right, we probably get some flooding here. But by looking around, it's like the amount of flooding is that the water might only be 6 to 10 inches deep, no deeper than that.
Yeah,
And it's like there might even be ways to make it drier. But then it's like, as permies, we might argue like, well, we don't want to make it drier. In fact, we want to make it wetter. We want to, like, build ponds and stuff. So
there is a pond about halfway between this meadow and that creek that seemed to be, I don't know if it's a spring or what, but it's a pond that nothing's going into it, but water's coming out of it.
okay, all
And
right,
that heads down into that big ravine.
all right.
And is there a road right there at the base of those deciduous trees? That's the main road on the north of the
To
property.
um,
So it looks like there's a road
yes,
there.
in this picture, There
Yeah.
is not a road. So this picture you're on is taken from the probably the far west side of the property. That's about 600 feet from the road.
Okay.
And yeah, and then it is, but those evergreen trees go, it's pretty thick with trees like that and underbrush and all that stuff, all the way up to the road. From the road to this point, it's pretty thick. And then, yeah, there's this little patch of deciduous here. And then throughout after this, it's kind of mixed deciduous with evergreen trees. Heading away from the road, heading south.
All right. I was going to make suggestions about hugelkulturs and how we don't need to do berms because um, there's so much windbreak already. And I suspect that if you're there, you don't get a lot of wind very often. Although you are near enough to the ocean that you might get some extra wind. Do you know about what the wind is like there?
I don't know other than my own experience yesterday, which was it wasn't that windy.
Okay. All right. All right. So, part of me is kind of thinking that we've been at this for 3 hours now, and it's about time to wrap it up. But uh, I'm thinking about the way I'm trying to think about like what would be some designs that I would want to try and do based on the pictures that I see. Um, and part of it is like, yeah, it's great to have 15 acres instead of 5 because there's more you can do. I'd be a little bit curious too about like if you went and started cutting down trees, would there be any laws against you cutting down trees? I mean, I imagine in the riparian area there probably are, but you know, how wide is that riparian area? How much does that riparian area come on to, you know, like will that riparian area consume your entire property? And so like you won't even be allowed to plant a garden. Those will be things to be looking into. But ignoring all of the laws and just saying like, what if we're here and what if we're going to try and do things? I mean, you know, naturally as permaculturalists, what we want to do is a lot of ponds, but what I'm trying to say is that in this area that gets flooded, I think good tall hugelkulturs are a great solution because most of the hugelkultur bed is going to be out of the flood, above the flood.
Yeah.
And so
And all that water is going to stay soaked up throughout the summer when it does get dry.
yeah, and then the water that is low and part of the flooded thing wicks up into your hugelkultur the perfect amount. It's
Yeah.
really a wonderful, beautiful thing. And it looks like that's a lot of birch over there. I'll bet there's a lot of dead birch that's going to be great for inside of a hugelkultur. You know, what a magnificent wood for inside of a hugelkultur. All right. Let's be thinking about wrapping this up, but is there a couple of other questions that you want to ask about these properties?
Uh, Let me just think about that. I think a lot of my questions about these properties were worked in previous into the general questions. And then I just wanted to see if you saw anything that would, you know, dash my hopes and dreams against a rock. But before I put down, $100,000 to $200,000. So
Right. I'm
um,
I'm not seeing anything now. Um, I mean, the slope looks very gentle, but there is slope,
yeah,
so that's a good sign. I see a lot of biomass, which is a really good sign. Too wet for my tastes. Um, also, not cold enough for my taste, but you know that's relative and subjective. And you like it a little wetter and a little warmer. So,
yeah.
um, I what kind of structure might you be thinking of building?
Well, I know that in this county, you can build a deck and a 25-foot, put a 25-foot yurt on it, all of that with electricity and plumbing and stuff um, without permits. So I think our plan is going to be to do that first. And then if something like a Wolfati or a cob structure is viable for the future, something more like that is a longer term structure or additional structures as to that. But I think the first thing we're going to do is for a deck on here with a yurt, just so we're able to have something to sleep in.
Okay, great. Um, so let's talk about the Wafati a little bit.
Yeah.
You're gonna the Achilles heel for the Wafati is the same thing for any Ailer structure. So Wafati is kind of like a variation of an Ailer structure, kind of a
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so both of them do not do well with flooding at all. So
Got it.
now the other thing is that if you've got water, if you've got mud puddles there, mud puddles
Mhm.
are going to be an indicator of soil that does not drain particularly well. So probably a fairly
Yes.
decent amount of clay content, which would then indicate that it's going to be easy to build a lot of ponds there. But if you're going to try and build something like a Wafati, then you're going to need the ability to keep that dry. And
Yeah.
so maybe, a spot that's a little higher up. Now,
Yeah.
a
There
lot of
is.
rain is not a
Yeah.
problem for Wafati. Oodles of rain, 200 inches of rain a year, not a problem. It's the part where you're building it somewhere and it's like the flood level
Yeah,
is,
your water table.
yeah,
Yeah.
or maybe not even the water table so much as a temporary water table. Um,
Right.
so, like,
Yeah.
if you're in an area that gets flooded, it's like the Wafati does not cope with that well. And so we would need to make sure that it's not flooded. Now I'm guessing that right here, it's not necessarily that it is like this picture that we're watching. It's not exactly that it's getting flooded. It's that the shape of this plot, the right here is something so that it simply doesn't drain well.
Yeah.
So it's not
I'm
like
looking
the
at the
creek.
topographical map and it's pretty flat right in this area. This is the flattest area of the whole thing.
So it's not like the creek that's nearby rose up 30 feet and then
Oh,
included
oh
this
no.
area. What it is that the creek never rises that much, but that when there's an enormous rain event, then the water doesn't drain out of here particularly well. And so
Yeah.
it's not that it's kind of floody and kind of not floody. It's like big mud puddly, not from the rising of the water table. So I would say that, like, let's not ruin that. Like that, let's work with that. That's how nature is right there. Let's pretend it's nature that's making it that way.
Mhm.
Not something like that road over there or whatever. And then it's like, surely there's another spot on this property that's a little higher up that could be kept dry naturally. That would be a
Yeah.
good spot for a Wafati.
Yeah. I do see a spot that sounds like that.
Okay.
But Wafati is not the end all be all. There's other things that are above ground that
What?
are
What?
nice
Ah,
and
no. Oh, you lie. Sorry. I might have a bias.
right.
I,
So
I
slightly suboptimal above ground house might be in order, but
right. I mean, of course, Wafati is an above ground structure.
oh,
Um,
true.
And I just kind of don't want to, because when you're building it, you're going to be putting a bunch of poles in the ground 3 to 4 feet deep, and it's like
Mhm.
if the and granted, you're going to be building an umbrella around that so that those poles stay dry. But if you're in an area that's just like if the water table is high, or
It's coming up from underneath.
then that's not going to work out well. So yeah, if we can get up a little bit higher, then I think you would be, based upon like there is some slope to this ground and the plot is big enough. Okay,
Yeah.
I feel my voice giving out,
I
and
yeah, I have some things to do that are starting soon. So I'm ready to call this one.
okay, all right. Well,
Thank
if
you
you
very
like this
much.
sort of thing, come on out to the forums at permies.com, where we talk about what is the best land, homesteading, and permaculture all the
All
All
time.
the
the
time.
time.